a Rama. Hey, why is it recording? Okay.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, we want to start with a third-party risk management. Any questions, please? Concerning the things that we've talked about. Okay.
Hey, Manu.
Yeah, Gary.
Yeah, so last week, sorry, on Saturday, they made mention of intake form or intake. Is that the same as the due diligence? Sorry.
Okay. Due diligence request actually involves everything that we are doing. When we talk about intake is just when you submit the request for the first time, or when a vendor submits a request, that is where the intake comes in. And due diligence request has to do with the whole process that we are going through. So we always say that you see a vendor and you see that people are asking, or you see that they're asking that, hey, this engagement, have you submitted a due diligence request? What you are talking about, have you submitted a due diligence request? Yes, no. So it involves everything that we are talking about, everything that we are doing. The intake is just the first part before we get into the actual risk assessment part of it. That is where the intake takes place. So when you submit the request, the intake is when it's more like we are taking in this third party before we go and do our start onboarding and all those things. Before we send them the IRQ questionnaire, that is where the intake is. Does that make sense, Gabby?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great question. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Now, if there's no other questions, can anyone also help us with the third-party risk management process? In 2 to 3 minutes. We'll see the third-party risk management process or the vendor risk assessment process.
Yeah, Emmanuel can go. You want me to go?
Yeah, you can give it a try. We are here.
Emmanuel, sorry, Gabby, before you start, Emmanuel, please, I think you don't pick up on people. You're not going to speak. So please ask people, they don't need to talk through all the steps. Some can start and some will continue.
Okay.
But Gabby has already asked a question, so was it Gabby that was about to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Gabby has asked a question, so we can move him, we can give a pause. Or if he wants to finish it up, that's fine. But I think you should ask people, because if not, everyone is going to be on mute.
I can say something.
Okay.
What did you say?
I said I could say something. I could add something to it.
Okay, let's Gabby start and let's see.
The third-party risk management.
No.
Okay.
Gabby is the one who say, so Gabby will start, then after we'll come to you. So Gabby, please.
All right, so the third party start with a business owner submitting a due diligence form. All right, so the party TPR manager receives this due diligence, and then the first thing he does is the inherent risk assessment or inherent risk questionnaire. So when this questionnaire is sent to the the business owner, he has 5 to 10 working days to complete the assessment. And this assessment has questions where these questions determine what type of engagement this is going to be. If the assessment is submitted within 5 to 10 business days, the TPR manager has to assess them and determine whether it is a low, moderate, high, or critical. If it is a low or moderate, he has to check his security scorecard to see if it is an A, B, or C, and then the engagement is done. That is, they finish it. Like he gives them the go ahead to go ahead. But if it is low or moderate, if it is high or critical, that is when you check other stuff. That is, there's other stuff you need to look at. That is, if the engagement is going to involve PII, or if it's going to involve PCI DSS, or if it's going to involve SOC, then you send him that is the SIC light questionnaire to continue. Then with the SIC light, it depends on the types. Also, you're going to send either IT questionnaires or OT questionnaires or DP questionnaires or either privacy questionnaires, depending on the type of engagement you're going to have. So I'm just going to stop here for everyone to continue.
And when he says he has finished the easier part, add the hard one to it.
Okay, so like an overall thing is there's 3 stages: the onboarding, the ongoing, and the offboarding. And then I'm gonna go off from where he left off. So if the assessment, if the risk assessment is either critical or high, then it will trigger other questionnaires, like you said, OT, IT, DP. And if when we get it back and then we go through the questions and we see that there's some stuff that don't make sense, they have to follow up with follow-up questions to figure out why they answered the certain way that they answered. And then, like you said, we do a scorecard in there. As long as the card is not a D or F, then we can move forward and see what else we could do. That's a little bit I can add. He said most of it.
Okay.
So I have a question, please. Edwin, could you tell me what OTIT stands for? You just threw it in there. Do you want to tell me what it stands for? I'm just using the acronyms.
Yeah, IT is, so we have IT, which is information technology. We have DP. We have P, which is personal, and I don't have enough now for the OT and the T, the OT and the DP.
I can help us out.
Okay.
OT is operational operations technology, and I think P is privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Then DP is
data protection, data privacy.
Data privacy, okay.
Okay.
You might see you want to smile. You smile, you see.
Like I'm smiling in my head. Okay. So, what are some of the questions?
Can we get the UK? Emmanuel, I think, can we get the UK solicitor to speak with me? Sorry, why are you looking at me like that? Because I think we got it from the American.
Okay.
Can we have a UK people
To tell
have
us.
a call?
No problem.
Yes, please. Anybody can start.
Gabby has talked us through the process really. There's nothing.
I didn't get.
Barely hear you.
Yeah, with that.
I said, I think Gabby has talked us through the process already.
We want to hear what your thoughts are. It doesn't have to be, like what I'm trying to say is I want to know how you understand it. I know Gabby has talked us through, but you can also explain it to us how you understand it. You can start by the onboarding, ongoing, and offboarding, and then somebody else can finish. Or you can start through, the business unit process. How you understand it.
Okay, so what my understanding is the product owner selects a preferred vendor and then create a vendor profile. So once that is done, they pass it on to the legal team, and then after it goes to the legal team ensure BBA, which is business associate assessment, is in place. Once that is done, that is when the due diligence comes in. The product owner files out an inherent risk questionnaire to determine whether the system is low, high, or moderate. And then Fred, do you want to support me from here?
I don't want to support you. Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, so after the inherent risk questionnaire,
Michael, it's okay. Just pause. I want somebody else to carry on. Paris, Shalom, Amanda, Irama. There's no right or wrong. Just trying to help. Shalom, what's wrong? Do you want to pick her up?
Fred.
He said he doesn't want to support you, so I don't know. Guys, please. Shalom.
Honey, where we continuing from?
From where Michael left off.
From the inherent risk questionnaire.
Wait, I'll come back to you guys in a second. I'm coming. I'll come back to you guys in a second.
Shalom, what do you think?
So, can I finish off with what I know?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah, so after the inherent risk questionnaire is done to determine whether the system is low, high, or moderate, you then do a VTA, which is vendor tiering assessment, to review the inherent risk questionnaire. And if it's a high, you move to a vendor risk assessment. Yeah, that's where I am at. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the UK to step in and see if we can talk to us about the process?
So there's onboarding, ongoing, and offboarding.
Okay.
Those are the three major steps or this life cycle. And with onboarding, you have planning and risk assessment, which will determine if the third party is in scope, determine the inherent risk, the engagement and whether the product or service is considered critical to your organization's operations. That would also include due diligence and contracting. Offboarding would be termination, exit plan execution, and third-party risk management closure. With planning, you have to identify the need and benefit of the vendor's relationship and why they are outsourcing this activity. That's when we used the Amanda and Sheila comparison the other time. well, not comparison, but example, identifying the vendor who would actively manage the relationship and be responsible for the third-party risk management deliveries. You would also have to determine the criticality, which would be the impact the business engagement may have on a particular product or services. And that will be classified as either critical or non-critical. So some of the questions would be, would a sudden loss of this service or vendor disrupt the organization? And would it also impact the customers? And if the time for the vendor to recover operations exceed 24 hours, would there be a negative impact to our organization? And I think some abbreviations that came up was ROT, recovery operation time, and that's the one I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know there are about 3 of them.
Okay.
There's ROT, there's I think that's what my brain will just be able to say right now, but I know there's about 3 abbreviations. So if I remember, I'll type it down there. I'll let you know.
Okay. Anyone with anything to finish it off for Perez or? Right. Okay. So, for the benefit of all of us, I'll try and go ahead and go over the steps once again so that we can capture it. Then afterwards, we can move into what we have for today. We have a lot to cover today, so it wasn't my plan to spend our time on this, but I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page. Now, the third-party risk management program or the assessment starts when a business unit wants to be able to bring on a vendor. Now, if the business wants to bring on a vendor, they send us what we call a due diligence request. And it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have any knowledge, I'll now go the micro routes and talking about the legal and compliance. But majority of the time, I'll keep it simple. I just want to be able to stay in the confinement of what I'm talking about. Now, we go ahead and send them a request. They'll send in a due diligence request or a DDR request. Now, their due diligence request is telling us about the engagement. Now, then that they want to onboard a vendor. So we will do our intake, onboard a vendor, validate their email address, their website, those basic information. Then we send over the inherent risk questionnaire. Now, the inherent risk questionnaire is supposed to tell us about the engagement that they are going to have with the business. And so this inherent risk questionnaire is asking them the criticality of the business. Is it going to process PI? Do they need access to our system? Is it a supply chain? And so we ask all those questions. And when we ask all those questions, we are just trying to understand the engagement that the business is trying to have with the third party. Now, after they have responded, they will send it over back to us. Now, and that is where I do my due diligence to be able to analyze the responses they are giving to us to determine whether it's a low, moderate, high, or critical. If it's a low or moderate, I look at my security scorecard to be able to validate the score. Then afterwards, I close the assessment. If it is a high or critical, this is where I have to be able to go ahead and trigger the vendor risk assessment. Now I'm going to send over the questionnaire, the vendor risk assessment questionnaires to them. And when I send it to them, my goal or my purpose is for them to be able to respond to those questionnaires. Those questionnaires is basically asking them what controls they have in place. Now they'll respond back to those questionnaires. Then now I will have to review the responses that they gave us. Now, if I realize that the risk that is involved is high, it's based on some of the responses that they gave, I'll go and ask follow-up questions. And if I realize that the response that I had, all of them are fine, and then I can go ahead and close the assessment. So, Edwin, you don't tell them that if their responses make sense. You are trying to determine the risk. So, if the responses that they give you, if you still see that there are certain risks involved, then now you go ahead and make sure that you are doing what? You are asking follow-up questions to be able to make sure that they have that right controls in place before you can go ahead. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's the vendor risk assessment process. Any questions, please? Okay. Thank you all so much for your contribution. We want to continue from where we left off. Now, during the vendor risk assessment process, there's another aspect that I didn't mention, and that has to do with reviewing of documentation. What do I mean? Now, the vendors, when you are sending them the questionnaires, we also send them, we can also request that they send us certain documentation to be able to prove to us that truly what they said they have done, they actually have it. An example. Now, a vendor may tell you that, hey, I have ISO certification. You would want to request that, hey, is it possible that you can send us your ISO certification that can show us, or that can help us to be able to know that truly you have the ISO certification? Or they might say that they have an access control policy in place. Can they send us a copy of the policy? Or can they share screenshots of some parts of the policy so that we can validate that truly they have those policies in place? Does that make sense? Now, in our quest to do that, there are so many things that we can ask from them. And so, one of the things that we can ask from them, we call it the SOC2 report. We can ask what we call the SOC2 report. We can also ask them, and when we say SOC2 report, SOC2 is also another framework. So they are compliance frameworks. So we can ask them that, okay, can you share your SOC2 report with us? Now, when it comes to the SOC2 report, there are two types. We have type 1 and type 2, and I'll go over them in the class also. We can also ask them that, can you share your ISO certification with us? Which they can also share that ISO certification that they have also with us, which can also make us understand that, okay, truly they have the ISO certification. They send screenshots of the ISO. They can say they do pen tests. Okay, if you do pen test, can you show us the pen test? Then they can also go ahead and show that also to us. So there's kind of, these are the kind of documentation that we will ask them to be able to see. Now, as a TPM analyst, when you are getting these certifications, you are not just getting it to tick the boxes. You need to review what they have brought you so that you can be able to understand what is in there. And so we want to start from the SOC2 reports. And that is what is going to lead us into the other frameworks. Please be with me here because I want you to be able to follow, to be able to understand what we are doing. Now, SOC2 is also another compliance framework. Now, there are two types of SOC. We have SOC. All of them are SOC. But one of them It's called Security Operations Center. Now, when we talk about Security Operations Center, this is where, I'm trying to show you an image of it so that it makes it easier. You see, if you see, I'm sure you have seen places like this. Please, can you see my screen? This is what we call the Security Operations Center. Every organization have this kind of SOC. And majority of the time, when we say cybersecurity, this is what many people think about, that this is the only part of cybersecurity. We call them Security Operations Center because what they do is that they monitor every threat that is coming to the organization. They are the ones that respond to every threat that is coming. How do they do that? They do that by monitoring everything that is going on, all the devices within our organization. And that is the Security Operations Center. Now, the SOC that I am referring to here is not that Security Operations Center type of SOC. And so, it is not the Security Operations Center. This time around, that SOC is what we call System and Organization Controls. It's a typical interview question that they can ask you, that what is the difference between the two types of SOC? Or when you say SOC, what do you mean? Now, this is called System and Operation Controls. It is an organization that has come up with their own framework that comes to audit and see how controls have been implemented. Are they implemented effectively? That's why we say system and organizational controls. Now, we have SOC 1. Shalom, you have a question or you're okay?
Sorry. Apologies if there's noise in the background. You said that a typical interview question would be what does SOC stand for? In what context would the interview question be? Because obviously you've gone from Security Operations Center straight to System and Organization Controls. So how would the question then be?
They can ask you what is the difference between the two.
Okay, just like that.
Yeah. Because you will tell them that you review SOC reports, and they can ask you that what is the full meaning of the SOC itself.
Okay.
One is Security Operations Center, and one is what? System and Organizational Controls.
Okay.
Now, the difference is that the Security Operations Center involves being able to monitor events, threats that are happening in the organization, whereas the Service Organizational Control is a framework.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, please? Okay. Now, when it comes to the Service Organizational Controls, they have three types of SOC: SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. SOC 1 focuses on financial data, which is also an interview question. What is the difference between SOC 1 and SOC 2? SOC 1 focuses on what? Financial data. SOC 2 focuses on the 5 trust service principles. SOC 1 focuses on financial data. How do we protect our financial data? Whereas SOC2 helps you to be able to measure how your 5 trust principles are implemented. And I know now the question is, what are the 5 trust principles? The 5 trust principles are confidentiality, processing integrity, availability, privacy, and security. Interview questions, so please. Confidentiality, processing integrity, availability, security, and privacy. Yes, Shalom.
No, sorry, I just wanted you to repeat it, but you did. Thank you.
Yep, you are very welcome. And so when you're looking at the difference between the two, first you are looking at the fact that whenever we say that it is intended to be used to validate and verify that internal controls over financial reporting are sufficiently in place at the vendor for your contracted use. Whereas when it comes to SOC2, it helps you to measure how the vendor provides their product or service under the umbrella of the specific trust service criteria. Yes. I like how your brain is working. It's a CIA trial plus privacy and security. Yes. We also talk about the fact that when you review this SOC, when you are primarily concerned with the impact to financial reporting, whereas when you talk about SOC2, it includes the 5 trust principles. Then I said that generally meant for auditors' use and compliance purposes. And see that a SOC2 may not cover all the 5 trust service criteria, as vendors can choose which criteria they want to be audited on. And that's the key differences between the 1 and the 2. So the 1 is making sure that SOC1, please. I'm going to add another layer to it. That's why I'm trying to be able to differentiate between the two before I add the other layer to it. SOC1 is making sure that we have the right financial controls. SOC2 is making sure that we are meeting the specific 5 trust principles that we have been audited for. Now, we also have what we call type 1 and type 2. So we have SOC2 type 1, SOC2 type 2. Then we have SOC1 type 1 and SOC1 type 2. All the type 1s, we call it a point-in-time assessment, meaning that the audit is done at a specific point in time. The type 2 is a duration or for a period of time. So when it comes to the type 1, the assessment is done, today's date is the 19th of March. So they have come, we are come to do an assessment. It's a SOC1 type 1 assessment. They are checking the financial data of Fort IT as at March 19th. And they go ahead and do the assessment and they are done. Maybe they can take them a week, 2 weeks, or a month. Type 2, when they come, they are not just coming to audit to see. They want to be able to be there to see how you are effectively implementing those controls. So instead of the type 1 where they will come and tell you that, hey, do you have maybe who signs off on all the check? We say only 2 people, that's it. Michael Della signs one, then Isaac Williams also signed the second one. Okay, great. When it comes to the type 2, who signs the check? Isaac and Michael. Okay. We want to be able to make sure that the check is being signed, or we are seeing that the check is being signed. So whenever Edwin presents a check that, oh, I need this check to go and do this, they are there to see that this is a process that it goes through. So they are not just hearers or they are not just seers. They want to be able to make sure that they are experiencing it. So they have to be there for a period of time, at times 6 months, at times 12 months. Does that work for us, or does that make sense to us? I think silence means
Sorry,
consent.
Manuel. Sorry, my background's a bit loud. Just want to clarify. So the auditors will come and stay in the organization for 4 to 6 months?
Yes.
Okay.
They will be there for that long to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So over here, I say that when you talk about the type 1, type 2, we are saying that it's a point in time which covers the design of controls placed in operation. And this is something that you can also encounter in an interview a lot. When they can ask you that what is control design? Control design is just a control that has been designed. When I say control has been designed, it says that, okay, in our environment, we are saying that we need 2 people to sign off on a check before we go ahead and send it out. It is designed.
No.
Yes,
So
Perez.
the control design doesn't matter if it's a SOC 1 type 1 or SOC 1 type 2, as long as it's designed and works for its purpose.
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yep. So when we talk about control design, that is what we are referring to. We want to make sure that that control is in place. It's been developed. So we call it the implementation, the development of our controls. That is control design. But when we talk about control effectiveness, meaning that we are testing that it is working effectively. Typical example. I have a PlayStation 5. I say that my pad is not working. So I want to go and buy a new pad. Now, I go and buy the new pad. Then I want to come and use the pad. I said I'm using it. So when somebody asks me, I said I have it. Now, the control has been designed and implemented. But when Douglas comes in and says that, okay, he wants to test the effectiveness, meaning that he wants to see whether the pad is working effectively. So he wants to be able to experience that I'm using the pad for the pad to work. That is the effectiveness. That is he testing the effectiveness of the control. Please, does that make sense? Shalom, your face is not encouraging for me, so please I have to come back again and ask you, do you understand what I mean by control design and control effectiveness?
Not completely, no.
Okay. When we say control design, I'm saying that something that has been developed and implemented. When I say control effectiveness, we are talking about something that have been developed, implemented, and also tested to make sure that it is working effectively. So we will have the control, we have set up the control, everything, we say that, okay, the control has been designed, it is in place. But the effectiveness is that, okay, let's test this to make sure that it's working. Do Do you understand what I mean now? Yeah. You bought a new phone case. You said you have a new phone case, everything. Yeah. The effectiveness is okay. Can I put the phone case on the phone, then test it to make sure that it's serving the purpose for which I bought a phone case? That is the effectiveness. Please, any questions? Okay. SOC2 type, SOC1 or SOC2, any of them, the type 2 is what tested the effectiveness of the controls. Type 1 is just for the design. So when an auditor comes for a SOC2 type 1, they are just testing the design. Hey, do you have password? Yes, I have it. Do you change your password every 6 months? Yes, I do. Okay. Type 2, when it comes, he wants to be there to experience that, okay, when the time is up for you to change the password, what do you do? That is testing the effectiveness of the control. Okay. So we have SOC1 type 1 and SOC1 type 2. And we have SOC2 type 1 and SOC2 type 2. Interview question. What is the difference between SOC1 type 1, SOC1 type 2? What is the difference between SOC1 and SOC2? Then what is the difference between type 1 and type 2? And a key difference is what I've told you. One is a point-in-time assessment. One covers a period of time. One tests just the design of the control. One also tests the effectiveness of the control. Let's move on. Then we have what we call SOC3. Now, when we are talking about SOC3, SOC3 becomes more like a report of what was done during the SOC2 type 2. A majority of the time, SOC3, they always give it out or it's public. But the SOC2 type 2, majority of the time, it contains how the control is working. So not all organizations will give you those. And that is what gives us an idea about how their security posture is. Why do we even request for this SOC? We want to know how matured and effective the vendor's cyber security risk management program is. But we want to do that in relation to what? The product or the engagement that the vendor is asking us. That is why we request for this vendor. Now, I'm going to show you a copy of the SOC2 type 2. I have one that was open last week. Now, I want us to be able to go through the various sections. Now, when we say, and I'm doing this because, see, in an interview, you're going to tell them that you review SOC2 type 2, and they are going to ask you that when you say you review SOC2 type 2, what do you look out for? So I need you to be able to know these things so that you can be able to talk about it, that this and this is what you look out for when you are reviewing SOC2 type 2. Now, the section 1 of the SOC is the auditor's report. Now, it's going to tell you the key information such as who the auditing firm is, what kind of audit it was. The section 2 is going to tell you, we call it the management's assertion. I think it's delaying you. But when it comes out, I'll let you know. Now, I'll screen share and share with you. Let me see. Now, when we talk about management's assertion, we are saying that what does the management say, or what did the management say? What did the management say about the audit that was conducted, or the findings that came out? Then we have the third part that talks about the description of the system. Now, this is where you are describing the system. How was this audit done? Which system did it cover? The scope. All those things comes in here. And so over here, I have that it addresses the many topics, including the risk management topics and all the things that are in relation. Okay, I've closed it so now I can copy it. Then we have section 4, which is the actual layout. Oh, okay. Which is the actual layout of the control objectives and activities along with the testing and the results of the testing. Now, when we talk about the control objectives, anybody knows what the control objectives are? Control objectives.
What they look for in the controls.
Okay. What we look for in the controls. So every control, the requirements that makes up that control, that is the objectives of the control. And so those are the things that they are also looking at section 5. Those are the things that they are talking about, the control objectives. And so it's going to go into the content of it. The thing says it's installing again. I'm surprised that this thing is not opening. Then the section 6, the system description. Now, when we talk about the system description, we are talking about describing the system, and the image down here is a copy of how the description looks like. I mean, if not, I'm going to share the SOC2 report with you all. It's a public document, so I Googled it and find it, so I'm sure it's not going to be a big deal sharing. Now, this description is going to detail the services that is being provided. Okay, I got it. So this is a copy of how the SOC2 Type 2 reports looks like. So the section 1, that is the auditor's report, is going to tell you about the scope of the assessment or the scope of the engagement that you did. Remember, it is a third-party auditor that is coming to audit your organization. And so you need to be able to make sure that they are describing everything. So over here, it says that we have examined Proventus IT's accompanying description of its Proventus system titled Description of Proventus throughout a period. Why is this important? Because this is going to tell us whether it's a type 2 or type 1. Do you understand?
Sorry, Madam, can you make it bigger, please?
Yeah, I was just about to say that as well.
Okay. Can you see it now? Okay.
Yes, please, thank you.
Yeah. Now, along the way I've made it bigger for you there, can you help us read? At least. I did it for you, so. Okay, you can just read this section for us before we.
We have examined Provectus IT Inc.'s accompanying description of its Provectus system titled Description of Provectus throughout the period April 19, 2022 to July 19, 2022. Description: based on the criteria for a description of a service organization system in DC section 200.
Okay. So now it has given you the period that they did. So it says April, May, June, July, 4 months. Meaning that there's what? A period of time. So it's a type 2. As soon as you see this, automatically it's supposed to tell you that it's a type 2. Does that make sense? Because it's not a point in time. It is for a duration of period. Then, when you read down here, you see that it comes and it tells you that what? The service, the 5 trust principles that it did. Over here, it says it did for security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Meaning that for everything. But they could have chosen to do for only 3 of them. That is what applies to them. So when you are reviewing a SOC2 report, these are the things that you are looking at. First, you are looking at the scope, the auditor that came to do it, the scope. What did the auditor do? What was their responsibilities when they came on board? And I have a document where I listed all these things on there also. So I'll share that one also with you. Because of time, I will not be able to go through it, but I'll share that also with you. But after you come to the assertion of the management, that is the management's assertion, as I talked about. What does the management say? We have prepared the accompanying description of the based on this and this. The description is intended to provide reports with information about Provectus IT Incorporated, Provectus system that may be useful when assessing the risks arising from interacting with Provectus. So meaning that whenever you are dealing with them, this can give you a report of the risks that has to do with their system.
Emmanuel,
Yes, Perez.
the risk that has to do with the system for the duration of 2022 April to, so would that be at a point in time?
No, it still has to do for a duration of period. So the point in time means that we have come to do an assessment, like a one-time assessment. This time around, we didn't just do a one-time assessment. We were there over time, so we saw how they were doing their things. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. The type 1 tells you about, we came to assess them, their system, and see how it was, the controls have been designed and implemented. But this time around, we test the effectiveness of the control. So we have to stay there over time to test the effectiveness of that control. That is what it means there.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
With a type 1, is it just like, how long would that take? Like 1 day or like 1 week?
Oh, no. It's not going to take, it can take a week, it can take a month. But mostly it doesn't go beyond a month. Any other questions? Okay. And so you see that we just remember that these are the management's assertion that they came up with. Then they will sign off. Then you come to another section, discretion of Provectus, and that's when they start the company. What do they do? What is involved? Their systems. Where are they saving their information? All those things comes into the description of the company and so on. I'll send this to you so that you can also review it. But I just want to be able to draw your attention to some of these things so that you are aware of it. Now, and that is how you review a SOC2 report. Now, as you are reviewing the report, you want to make sure that the date has not expired. The company is accredited company that is supposed to do it, because not all companies are accredited to do the reports. You need to determine if the vendor has provided the correct reports. The system description, the section of the report will detail the services the products that are provided. Because multiple vendors services may have separate auto reports. Then you come to the sub-service organizations. Now, this will contain the service providers that are being used by the vendor. In other words, the fourth parties. Now, this report should clarify exactly how fourth party and sub-service organizations are used. Do they have access to the system, or they do not have access to the system? Do they have constant communication? And so, why? Because as we talked about, that gives you an idea that if they are hacked, is it going to affect your organization? Then, after the audit was done, they need to talk about something that we call a qualified opinion or unqualified opinion. What is a qualified opinion? Now, please, and this also listen to me very well because it gets tricky here. Many people, when you hear unqualified means that there's no opinion or we don't have any issues with the findings or there's no findings. Unqualified means that when the auditor feels that the vendor's description fairly represents the system, controls were suitably designed, and in case of type 2, the controls are operating effectively. This report is what we call unqualified. It means that everything is as it's supposed to be. Please do you get the point I'm making? When we say unqualified, it says that we call it unqualified opinion. It means that we are satisfied. Qualified opinion means that there is one or two issues or one or two findings that came up during the audit. And this is something they will ask you in an interview. So please be careful. What is a qualified opinion and an unqualified opinion? A qualified opinion is where the vendor had at least one control objective that was not implemented or operating effectively. In other words, a qualified report indicates that issues that were identified in a report were significant enough to deem one or more control ineffective. So meaning that they failed one or two of the controls. If you fail one or two of the controls, we say that there's a qualified opinion. And therefore, you want to make special notes of a qualified opinion. An unqualified opinion means that all the controls are working effectively. Why they do it like that, I don't know. I don't even know why they should. Yeah, because obviously when you hear the name qualified, it's like, but they call it a qualified opinion and an unqualified opinion. Any questions? Disclaimer. Disclaimer is used when there isn't any evidence to prove or disprove that a control wasn't being performed or was in place. This happens often on controls that surrounds what are hopefully rare occurrences, such as communicating incidents or breaches to clients. So meaning that you are the control, there's no evidence to prove or disprove that this control wasn't being performed or was not in place. So they didn't provide you the right evidences. That is where the disclaimer comes in. Then an adverse opinion is just bad. This means that the vendor held back or modified information needed to verify that was needed to be able to verify that the controls were either in place or operating effectively, and that becomes a red flag. Please, does that make sense? Unqualified opinion means that there is a finding. That means that there is no finding. Qualified opinion means that there is a finding. Disclaimer means that we needed evidences to prove that there is this, but we couldn't get any evidences to prove. So it's like, for us, we want to tell the truth, we don't know whether this control is working effectively or not because we didn't have any proof. or evidence. Then an adverse means that, Charlie, when they realized that the auditor was around, they were trying to do some skirmishes to change some of the things. And so there is something that is going on here. You guys need to have a look at it. Any questions, please? All right. If there's no questions on that, that is all that we want to be able to cover under SOC. Now we want to move to something else. We want to talk about GDPR. And I'm going to skip some because of our time. Now, when we talk about GDPR, I'm sure that we all have heard about it, or we know a little bit about it. Now, it is a privacy and security law. It's not just a framework, it's a law. And it has to do with data protection, or protecting the data of people. Now, this legislation came about there were two main data protection laws that this is being derived from. One, we call them the directives, and the other one is the regulations. I don't want to bore you with a lot of the history, so that's why I'm trying to rush through it so that I can explain the terminologies and stuff to you. Now, the key objective of GDPR is to provide a framework that more accurately reflects how we use data today, and therefore better protect the rights and freedom of natural persons as is being put in the regulation. Now, when we say a natural person, who is a natural person? A natural person is a living individual. And so the GDPR provides natural persons with the rights to be able to protect their personal data and when it is being processed. That is why when you go to any website, they will ask you that you need to accept all these before your data is something that is very, very important. I'm sure you and I, we don't respect our data, but when you think about it, it's because yeah, Shalom, we don't respect it, but it's very, very important. Majority of these terrorist attacks, they steal people's identity. Yeah, they need to steal somebody's identity and use that person's identity as the one that is causing the attack, but that is not what it even is. And so that is where the data becomes very, very important. Now, when we are talking about GDPR, we also need to talk about the various scope of GDPR. We have what we call the material scope and the territorial scope. Now, why am I? Now, when we talk about the territorial scope, we are talking about the location. So the regulation, or how do I go about it? Okay, let me backtrack. Now, when we are talking about the natural persons, okay, we are saying that not all natural persons, but only natural persons that are doing business with someone in the UK or EU. It used to be EU, but now Brexit. So we have to separate the two and say UK and the EU. Now, if you are doing business with any natural person there, you are required by law to protect their information. And that is where the scope comes in. And that's when the material scope comes in. Now, when we talk about the material scope, we are saying that personal data that is being processed, whether wholly or partly, by automated means, or personal data that is part of a filing system or intended to be part of a filing system, all of them falls under what we call material scope. So any personal data that is processed electronically falls under material scope. So any data that is uploaded to a computer or stored in any form, written down in any form, all falls in. So therefore, manual data is also in scope because it falls under what? Material scope. So all the companies that are storing data in person, all of them falls under material scope and are legally obliged to retain paper records, or else it becomes counterintuitive. Now, what falls out of scope? Personal data that is used for purely personal or household activities is out of scope. It is out of the material scope. If the processing of personal data by a competent authority for any law enforcement purposes is out of material scope. Or the processing of personal data to which Part 4 the 2018 Act or the intelligence or any intelligence, the 2018 Act is the Intelligence Services Processing Act, also falls out of scope. So if the police receive any new evidence about a suspected criminal in a case, they don't need your permission because it falls out of scope. So they don't have to issue you any privacy notice explaining that they are your personal data, they are using your personal data to be able to catch someone. No. Because it doesn't fall within the regulation. Does that make sense? Hello. Hey. Please, are we okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Mara. Can you repeat the last sentence, please? Just the last one.
So what I said was that if the police receive any new evidence about any suspected criminal in a case, they are not going to issue you a privacy notice explaining that they are going to process your personal information or your personal data to try to catch any suspect or anything. Why? Because it doesn't fall within the remit of the regulation. They are all out of scope. Because when the framers were making the law, they wanted to make sure that they knew that all these things will come. That's why they have what is in scope for material scope and what is not in scope. Or else everybody will see the police that, why is the police telling us that they need why didn't they ask us they need our permission before they use our information? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Now let's talk about the territorial scope also. Now when we talk about the territorial scope, now we are talking about the fact that it applies to all controllers and processes that are based in the UK. Now let's explain the controllers and processes shortly for you when we get to the terminologies. Regardless of where the processing takes place. So if your information is going to process, if they are offering any goods and services, irrespective of whether a payment of the data subject is required to set data subjects in the UK, or the monitoring of their behavior as far as the behavior takes place within the UK. So it's either the issue happened in the UK or you are dealing with someone who is associated with the UK or the EU, then you fall within the territorial scope. Then therefore GDPR applies. Does that make sense? So I have this chart over here which is explaining that it's a controller or processor in the EU. The processor is the one that is processing the information of the natural person that we talked about. And the natural person being you and I. The controller means that natural or legal person. And so that controller is the one that determines the purpose and needs of processing their personal information. If you don't give them a go ahead to process your personal data, your personal information, no, they cannot go ahead and do that. And that is the process, and that is the controller. The controller is you and I. The processor is the one that is processing the information. So we are saying that for you to know if GDPR applies, you ask yourself that is a controller or processor in the EU or UK. If it is a yes, then GDPR applies. If it is a no, then you ask yourself, is a controller or processor is therefore outside of the EU? If it is a yes, are they offering goods and services irrespective of whether the payment of the data or the subject is required? If it is a yes, GDPR applies. If it is a no, you go ahead to ask, are they monitoring the data subject's behavior within the EU? Yes, GDPR applies. No, GDPR does not apply. And that's how you determine if the GDPR applies or not.
So just wanted to clarify, Manuel. So the processor or the controller, or both of them, have to be either in the EU or dealing with somebody in the EU.
Yeah, one of them have to be.
Okay. So one of them has to be. Okay.
That is why almost all the global organizations, they fall under GDPR.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, please?
No, thank you.
Any questions?
Emmanuel, let's say I move to I'm based in the US and I'm in the UK. Will the GDPR apply?
You are in the US. You go for holidays in the
Europe or UK, yeah, any of them. Yeah.
I will apply to you.
Okay.
But do you know why I will apply to you?
Territorial?
Yeah.
Emmanuel?
Yep.
Is there a timestamp on how long this would? So you know the example that I think it was Michael just asked. So say I've lived in the UK my whole life, and then I moved to the US, for example, and I'm out there for, I don't know, 3 months, and then I decide to just come back to the UK for holiday, but I'm now living in the US. What does that look like? If that makes sense.
Repeat it again, sorry.
So I've lived in the UK my whole life. Let's look at the monitoring of their behavior, for example. Let's look at the monitoring of their behavior as far as their behavior takes place within the United Kingdom. So say, for example, I've lived in the UK my whole life, then I moved to the US, and then I come to the UK for holiday, and then say I do something, I don't know, or I don't know, my information needs to be processed for whatever reason. Does it still apply, if that makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Territorial, it came to happen.
Because it's happened in the UK.
Yes.
Okay, but then I can still get back. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Please, does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So
As far as it's happened here, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Whatever information, as long as it's here, like
yes.
that makes sense. Okay.
That does that make sense? Okay. Now, I explained to us what a controller means, a processor, the processing means. A controller means the natural person or the legal person or the public authority or agency or other body which alone or jointly with others determines the purpose and the means of processing of personal data. That is a controller. The processor means the natural or legal person or whoever it is that processes the personal data on behalf of the controller. So the controller is the one that is determining how that is supposed to be done. The processor is the one that is processing the personal data on behalf of the controller. Then the processing means any operations or set of operations which is performed on personal data or on set of personal data. Okay. Then we know what the personal data is. So we know what the personal data subjects. These are individuals who may be giving in personal information to the data controller. So Rama decides to go to Shalom's shop to go and buy something. Now, Rama is the data subject. Shalom owns the store. Rama needs to give Shalom the permission to process her data. So we say that a data controller is any entity that determines the purpose and means of the processing. In this scenario that we are talking about, Rama still becomes what? The data controller. But the processor is who? Shalom. Then the third party means any person other than the controller or processor. Processing means anything that is done to or done with or personal data. Then we have the restriction of processing and profiling. Means that any form of automated processing of personal data consisting of the use of personal data. Any questions, please?
Sorry, Manuel. I didn't really understand the difference between a data subject and data controller. I'm a bit confused.
Yes, not a problem. We are saying that the data subjects are the individuals who may be giving their personal information to the data controller.
Okay.
The data controller is an entity. When we say it's an entity, I'm just saying that it can be a natural person or an agency or a shop that determines the purpose and the means of the processing.
Okay.
What is the data being used for? That becomes a data controller.
No, I'm still confused because I'm confused about the data. Wait. No, I'm confused.
Now let me add the processor to it so that you don't get confused.
Yeah.
Now the data processor now becomes the entity or the person that is processing the data on behalf of the controller.
Okay, can you give an example again, please? Because the data process is involved, I'm also confused. Because, yeah, there's three of them. So, okay, I'm the data subject, so it's my information, my personal information that I'm giving to the data controller. but who would the data controller be? Is that a business, basically?
So it can be, there are so many different kinds. It can be a business, it can be a person.
Okay.
So it can be so many different things. I'm trying
And
to
then,
see.
yeah. So if
No,
if, for example, it's a business, who's the data processor then?
now the processor is the one that is processing the information on behalf of the controller.
So say the controller is a business, is the processor a person or like a team within the business?
So let's think about it this way. You go to an online shop to go and buy something.
Yeah.
Now, when you pick up the stuff is your information. The debit card is yours. So you are the data subject.
Mm-hmm.
The website that you are buying the things from
Mm-hmm.
becomes what? They are the controller. They are determining what you are going to do with. They decide what happens to the data.
Okay.
Now the website that you are buying the thing from, they are not the ones that are doing the payments, or they are not the ones that are in charge of the payments.
Okay, this makes sense now, yeah.
And so the payments processor now is the one that is going to process the data.
Okay.
But they don't control it.
Okay.
The website owner is the one that controls the data.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, you see, okay, so that example is if you were buying something. What about if it was just like a website you were subscribing to?
Okay,
and they were going to send you newsletters or something, or store your information.
Okay, so let's say a newsletter, when you go on there, you are the one that is subscribing.
Mm-hmm.
You are still the data subject.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the website, if they are the same people that are going to be able to control the data, now they become the data controllers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that same people who is going to send you the information that you need are the ones that are processing your data.
Okay, so it'll be the company would be both the controller and the processor.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense then. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
One quick question.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the data protection terms, it's another umbrella of the GDPR, right?
Yep.
Okay, so does it mean that the data subjects can opt out of the law if they choose to do so? Or
the data subject can say that don't process my data. You have the option of saying that. If your data is processed without your authority, yeah.
No, but I'm thinking of it on the opposite. Can they just say, okay, let's just say, another territorial where an American is in Europe. The territorial definition, it means that the law applies to the individual in Europe. Can they opt out of the GDPR law, like if they want to? And how do we do that? Is it even possible?
When you say opt out of the GDPR law, how do you mean? What do you mean?
I'm wondering if, so like, let's say you're in Europe for holidays. Do you maybe get an alert on your phone that, hey, you are currently under the protection of something, or you know?
It's not you. It is the organization that is doing business with you. Do you understand?
So they're actually obliged to follow the laws.
Yeah. It is the organization that is doing business with you. What they have done is that they want to be able to separate the one that is receiving the information, the one that is processing the information, and the one that is giving the information. Do you understand? So, like Rama used a newsletter. When you go into an organization, you realize that the perfect example, Rama, let's use physical newsletters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you go to a website and you subscribe, right?
Yeah.
Then the delivery person will bring up the letters to you every morning.
Okay.
Now, you are the data subject. The data controller is a news organization.
Mm-hmm.
The delivery man who is bringing the information.
That's the processor. Okay, that makes sense.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
All the time, these are the various, because the person that keeps your information, or the person that takes your information doesn't, at times they process it, but not all the time that they process it. But they are supposed to determine what you are going to do with the information. If the delivery man decides that, hey, I want to take an advert and bring other newsletter, no, because the instruction that you took the information for the purpose of what? Sending weekly emails or daily newsletters. The controller has determined what we need to be able to do. Anything beyond that, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
Any questions, please? Shalom, are you still thinking through it? Okay, so you give us an example that may help you to be able to understand it.
I don't have one. I was trying to think of a bank.
Okay.
So,
no, go ahead. Someone was saying something. No, Shalom, go ahead. I'm listening. I thought somebody was talking.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of okay, cool. A bank, for example. Who would be the data subject? Who would be the controller? Who would be the processor?
Okay. Now, when you go to a bank, you realize that every bank has somewhere that they keep their information or store their information. So let's say they are saving their information in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
You are the data subject. You go and open an account. The bank, that is the data controller.
Mm-hmm.
They collect your information, determine how your information is supposed to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And they are responsible for protecting your information.
Mm-hmm.
In their quest to protect your information, they will say that, okay, now they have a third-party company where Amazon AWS or iCloud.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones that they are going to use to store the information and secure the information. The Amazon cloud does not have any control over what to do with your data. They are following the instructions of the bank. The bank says that store the information for us. That's what they are doing.
Okay. So then does the third party then become the processor?
Yes. So the cloud service provider becomes the third party.
Okay. Cool.
So the place that because if the bank is the one, that bank is not the one that is keeping the information.
Yeah.
So the workplace is the third party. So that is why, because it protects everyone that have a way of seeing any part of the information.
Mm-hmm.
You see, if you understand this very well, GDPR, that's all you really need to do, Amadi. The rest is the audit process. And I'll go through very shortly. Any questions?
Hi, Emmanuel.
Yes, Perez.
So, with the explanation or the examples you've given,
I'll be surprised if I've not heard from you about this.
So if we were to use, let's say, as buying something online, because previously if you bought something in Europe, when you don't have to pay for taxes, but now let's say you bought something and it was being sent over to the UK, so the data subject would be the customer, that is me, the controller will be the company that I'm buying from. The processor will be. That's my question. Would that actually be Visa
So now you
or
have.
MasterCard?
So now you have two processes.
Okay.
Or probably three. One, because your information is going to go to the payment.
Yeah.
Your information is going to go to the person doing the delivery.
Okay.
All those becomes data processes.
Okay. Then when does the third party come in?
But all of them are third
Become the
parties.
third party. So they are the data processor and they still are the third party.
Yeah, because you didn't do it. You don't have any contract with them. The person you have a contract with
The person I'm buying from
is the is the website. Do you get it?
Oh, okay. That's why it makes sense when you contact delivery companies and they tell you that you need to contact the seller.
The seller. Yeah. You don't have the delivery.
Okay.
The delivery companies, they deliver what is being given to them.
Okay.
They know nothing about what you are doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ram, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was trying to think of another example. I was trying to think, for example, PayPal.
Okay.
Sometimes, yeah.
So if you use PayPal to do a payment, if you want your money back, you don't go to the bank, you go to PayPal.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because PayPal is your means that you need to do it. That's why PayPal quickly they'll get your money back for you. Yeah. Because PayPal is a means that you did what? That you used to be able to do. PayPal is the one you have a contract with.
Yeah. So then
You don't have a contract with the bank. Yeah. Even though you have your debit card attached to your PayPal account. You went through PayPal to go to the debit card.
Yeah.
So your payment and your argument comes with PayPal. The PayPal will now take the lead and go and do all the rest for you.
So in this case, the bank would be the third party then?
The bank will be a third party because the bank did it. So the data processes that we are talking about, it's not specifically supposed to be one company. It could be 3, it could be 4. Why? Based on the kind of transaction that you are doing. But we are saying that the one that took your information, you gave your information to them, they are determining what they are going to do with the information. Now, they have to tell you that, hey, I'm using your information to be able to do what? Send you the item that you purchase. That is what you agreed on. You didn't tell them that they need to be able to use your information to send you emails about advertising. That's why if they are asking you that you see that there will be a box down there, then they will say that receive emails. They need your consent before they can send those information to you. Perez,
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Christian.
Can you give an example with maybe like the airport? Let's say like when you get to the airport and you have to use your Wi-Fi.
Okay. When you get to the airport and you have to use their Wi-Fi, now you are going through the airport company to get to the Wi-Fi. The airport, they don't provide Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi service is provided by the tech company. Christian, does that make sense?
Yes.
The airport, they are providing their services. So they will sign an agreement to you and receive your email. They will say that your name, your email, and all. They will receive the information. The agreement is that they need to be able to use your information for what the reason why they took it.
Correct.
The third party becomes the internet provider that has to process that information. Or the airport can decide that they are selling your information to other companies for advertisement.
Yes.
Which mostly when you are doing that, they will let you sign up for it.
Yes.
And all of them, so those become the data processes.
Okay.
Now, but your main person that if you have any breach, the information is, who are you going to? The airport. Those are the ones that can, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions, please? Now, this regulation it's interesting. It has a lot of nuances to it. And so what they came up with, we call it the various principles. So they have 6 principles. Is it 6 or 7? Yeah. This one is too small. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, 7. The first one, they call it lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. What does it mean? They are saying that, yeah, they are saying that the data processing must be within the law. It must be fair and transparent to the data subject. Then they have the purpose limitation. Purpose limitation means that the data processing will be processed for legitimate purposes as specified by who? The data subject. So when you are collecting the data, you need to be able to specify why, and they need to be in that sense. Data minimization. You should collect and process only as much data as absolutely necessary for the purpose specified. That is why when you go to a website to buy something, they don't ask you for your NI number and your social security number. Why? It's not meant for it. But when you apply for credit, then they are going to ask you for those things. Why? Because they need to be able to collect the data for only the things that they need to be able to use to do. Please give me a few minutes and let's be able to finish at least the GDPR. We didn't even go to PCI and ISO. Does that make sense? Yeah, I don't know whether I should record that on a separate session and send it to you, or. But I also feel like that also it doesn't help.
Please, teacher.
Yeah. Shalom. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Shalom. We got to teach us.
Okay, no problem. I'll be here. I'm just hoping that you all will make time for me. That's all. I have a busy weekend trip coming up, but I'll arrange with Annette and we can get time to do that. Then, these are the first. Please, does this 3 make sense to us? Okay. Now let's go to the where are you? Other 4. Accuracy. Now, the personal data must be kept and must be accurate and up to date. You must keep the data accurate and make sure that they are up to date. Then we have storage limitation. You may only personally identify data for as long as necessary for the specified purpose. Then we have integrity and confidentiality. Processing must be done in such a way as to ensure appropriate security, integrity, and confidentiality.
I'll be honest with you.
Then we have accountability. Now, every GDPR compliance data controller must be able to show compliance with GDPR. So for you to be able to make sure that we are saying that, hey, I'm GDPR certified, you need to show that you are compliant with GDPR and all these principles, these 7 key principles. And what are they? Accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, accountability, then we have data minimization, purpose limitation, then lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. Any questions, please? Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we head out has to do with we don't have much time, so I can't go into the process that companies go through to be able to get GDPR certified. I hope now we have a better understanding of the deed and the principles, but I want us to be able to go through the certification process. Now, for you to be able to be GDPR certified, the first thing that you do is we call it initial assessment. What is initial assessment? Oh, okay. I was talking to somebody about this, so I just remembered that I was in the class. The organization needs to complete a questionnaire about data practices. You see, everything that you are doing in GRC that we are talking about, okay, when we say risk assessment, when we say gap analysis, all of them are the same. It's that same as the initial assessment. What does it mean? You complete a questionnaire about their data practices. This helps certify the gauge its current level of GDPR alignment. So what it's saying over here is that you need to complete a questionnaire. That questionnaire is going to tell you, it's going to ask you about, do you have these controls in place? Do you have this in place? Now, all those things that you're going to talk about, whether you have in place or not, that is what they are saying initial assessment. Because those are asking you, do you have the objective that is being specified in GDPR? Like data limitation that we talked about, data minimization, the lawfulness and all those things that we talked about. Now, all of them are domains. They have controls under them. So for you to be GDPR certified, you need to be able to be in compliance with them. So you do an initial assessment to see which controls do you have in place, which are the ones that you don't have in place. And this applies to all the other frameworks that we'll talk about. Then you do what we call a document review. Now, the certifier will review the organization's GDPR compliance documentation, including the data protection policy, record keeping, contracts, and more. Then, on-site audit. The certifier performs an on-site audit. And when we say the certifier, it's like the auditor who is coming to audit you to certify you. An on-site audit, examining technical infrastructure, your security controls, and GDPR accountability measures. What does it sound like to you? Just like an audit. It's the same process. Then you go to the next step, that is called what? Remediation. If the audit comes out with any deficiencies or findings, the organization needs to take corrective action plan to fill up the gaps in the compliance. That's why I say that it's also called what? Gap analysis. So all what you have done from the top, you want to make sure that what do you have? Do you have what GDPR is requiring of you? If you don't have it, you need to be able to make sure that you are getting all those in place. Then the auditor will come in and audit you. After that, first you need to do a document review by yourself. Audits will come and audit you. After that, it comes out with findings, remediate your findings, then now the certification process. Remember, GDPR is also valid for 1 to 3 years. And throughout the 1 to 3 years, they will come around to be able to come and audit you. Any questions?
Hey, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
So, if you ask someone to submit documents for GDPR, do you just take the certificate or there's a report for this?
They was going to say the certificate.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, please spare me some time, okay, 5 minutes. Now, this is an interview question that you'll be asked. That's why I want to be able to spend some time on it. You don't need to know everything, but it's very likely that they are going to ask you, because they know that now GDPR is separated the UK and the EU. They are going to ask you that what are some of the key differences? Because if you're a company in the UK, you don't do the things in the EU. Now, in UK, a child can consent at the age of 13. Whereas when it comes to the EU, it's what? 16 years. When it comes to the EU, processors of criminal data must have official authority to do so. When it comes to the UK, no. Process of criminal data do not require official authority to do so. There was a football player who actually had an incident in Spain. And this is what actually saved him. He's a Ghanaian footballer. Those who follow football will know it. He's a Ghanaian footballer. He had an incident in Spain where the girlfriend said he has raped him. He has raped her. He was on the verge of going to jail. This is what actually, because they said that the incident happened in Spain, and so they can't come in because the regulations over there are different. Yeah. Then the data subject. Yeah, if I say anything else, you know the player. So I don't want any legal case, but I'm sure he's a black. So it's an African, so I'm sure you all know who it is. But I'm not mentioning names. The data subjects have rights to refuse automated decision making or profiling. In the UK, they permit automated profiling subject to legitimate grounds for doing so. So if the authority is able to prove legitimate grounds for doing so, yes, they can go ahead and profile and do your profiling. But when it comes to the EU, they have the authority. The data subjects, have the authority to refuse automated decision-making or profiling. And I'll leave it right here, and I'll ask you to please look into the two differences. Whenever there's an interview coming up, especially for GDPR, I'll tell you to be able to look at those differences. They are something that you can also talk about, because it became something that we all discuss at work. So obviously, it's something that you also have to know. Now, does GDPR certification guarantee compliance? It is important to know that GDPR compliance certification does not guarantee you will never face GDPR enforcement actions. Do you get it? The fact that you are certified in GDPR doesn't mean that you cannot be sued for GDPR. Yes, you might be certified, but maybe somebody might abuse it or might use the data as the information in a way that they are not supposed to. Certification just reduces, but it does not eliminate compliance risk. Regulators like the UK, and these things that are written here, these are things you can talk about in an interview that makes you look someone that is more knowledgeable in an interview. In GDPR, that's why I'm taking my time to go over it. So please make sure you understand the first one. If you don't understand, I'll go over it again. Regulators like the UK's Information Commissioner's Office can still investigate certified organizations for GDPR breaches uncovered outside the certification process. Why? Because during the process, they are looking at controls. The fact that those controls are in place, it doesn't mean that they are working effectively. So your controls, you might pass them. They might say that, hey, like the newsletter that we talked about, maybe the delivery guy or the company that took the newsletter, somebody have abused those information. When you come to America, there's some we call HIPAA. And my wife is a nurse, and she was telling me that she can't even go and look at my medical records. It's against the law. When she is caught that she's looking at my medical, even though I'm the husband, she will still face legal charges. And that's what they are talking about. That if you go ahead and take information to do something, some people can use it for other things. Now, even though my wife's organization might be HIPAA certified and they might be maybe GDPR certified, let's say, imagine that she's in the UK, even if she's GDPR certified. And so everything that is in there, she might think that, hey, everything is fine, everything is okay. But because it's against the regulations, her company or her hospital might be GDPR certified and get a certification. But because my wife is just abusing her power, she's just thinking that's my husband, I can do whatever I want. It affects the whole organization. Then the third one, however, certification indicates that regulators are less likely to be able to prioritize you for routine audits or enforcement actions. So if you have a certification, they don't just jump in and say that we are coming to audit you or do anything. So it gives you that kind of assurance that your data practices align with GDPR. Then the ongoing internal monitoring, auditing, and training are recommended to maintain conformance. GDPR compliance ultimately remains an organization's responsibility, not just the certifiers. So the responsibility, you see, the fact that you are certified with GDPR doesn't mean that's what they are trying to tell you. So it is your responsibility, not the certifier, to be able to make sure that you are in compliance. The certifier will come and just do their due diligence and their process. But it's your responsibility to make sure that your company is still going by the things that it is being told them to do. All right, any questions? Please, if there's no questions, we just finished GDPR. We'll talk about ISO, PCI, and we have HIPAA to talk about. Then we are officially done with our class. I'm going to plead with us to be able to make time for me.
Recording stopped.